It was a calm evening at the famous Nusr restaurant, the kind of place where rich people go, where the tables shine, the steaks sizzle, and the lights make everything look golden. The staff moved quickly and sharply, trained to serve VIP guests. Like royalty, everyone expected fancy cars, gold watches, and loud voices from big names. But that night a man walked in quietly, dressed in a black coat, old jeans, and worn-out boots. He didn't look rich, didn't act proud, and didn't demand attention. Some people didn't even turn their heads, but the man walked calmly to the host and asked, "Is there a small table available?" His voice was soft and his face kind. The host looked at him with confusion, unsure if this man belonged here. But something about his calm manner made the host nod and say, "Right this way." The man was none other than Keanu Reeves, though most people didn't recognize him at first. He sat at a table in the corner. Alone, away from the main crowd, he didn't bring a manager, didn't ask for special treatment, and didn't even mention who he was. He opened the menu and looked through it like a regular man looking for dinner. Simple, polite, and peaceful, but not everyone treated him kindly. One young waiter noticed him and made a face. He turned to another waiter and whispered, "Look at that guy. Did he walk in from the street?" The other waiter shrugged, not knowing who the man was. The first waiter laughed quietly. "Wrong place, dude. This isn't a soup kitchen." He wasn't joking kindly. He was mocking. This waiter was known to be flashy. He liked rich customers, loud parties, people who wore diamonds and gold chains. To him, Keanu looked like a joke, like someone who couldn't afford the water. But he didn't know the truth. Not yet. Keanu gave a gentle smile when the waiter arrived. "I'll just have a steak. Medium, thank you," he said politely. The waiter rolled his eyes. "Sure, sir," he said with a fake smile. Then he walked off and laughed with another waiter again. The guy ordered steak like he can pay for it. When the food was ready, the waiter carried the plate in one hand and a small salt bowl in the other. Normally, Nusret waiters do a little performance with the salt, pouring it slowly and stylishly, like Salt Bay himself, but this waiter didn't care. He walked up fast, held the salt high, and threw it across the plate. The salt flew everywhere, some of it landing on Keanu's jacket, shirt, and even his lap. It was clear he did it on purpose, not by mistake. A few people turned and looked. One woman gasped. Another man raised his eyebrows. Even other staff noticed. But no one moved. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Keanu didn't shout. He didn't stand up. He simply looked down at his clothes, brushed the salt off slowly, then looked up at the waiter and said, "Could I speak to the manager, please?" His voice was calm, not angry, not rude, just soft. The waiter smiled smugly. "Sure," he said, and walked off as if nothing had happened. He didn't call the manager. He just went back to mocking with another waiter, saying, "He's not going to do anything, just look at him." A family sitting nearby had seen it all. A small girl tugged on her mom's sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, that man's being bullied." The mother got up, walked to Keanu's table, and offered a napkin. "Here, sir, for your coat," she said kindly. Keanu nodded with a soft thank you, still keeping his peaceful expression. People started to notice him now. Whispers floated around the room. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" "I think it is." "No way. Why would he be here alone?" Phones slowly came out, cameras recording quietly. But Keanu stayed the same, silent, still, gentle. Then a black car pulled up outside the restaurant. The glass doors opened, and someone important walked in. He wore sunglasses, a clean white shirt, and had a confident step. He smiled at guests as they stood up and greeted him with claps and waves. Salt Bay had arrived. The man who built this restaurant, who made tossing salt a world-famous move. He walked in with his usual charm, greeting people with handshakes and selfies, but his eyes scanned the room, and then landed on the salt-covered table in the back and the man sitting alone, brushing off salt like dust. Salt Bay's smile slowly faded. He tilted his head, confused, and began walking toward Keanu's table. The waiter who had thrown the salt froze in place. His face turned pale. His joke was about to backfire in a way he could never imagine. The air inside the restaurant felt strange, like something important was about to happen. People looked up from their plates and turned toward the quiet corner where the man in black sat. Everyone had seen what the waiter did. The salt was thrown, not served, and some of it still rested on the edge of Keanu's sleeve. But the man didn't look angry. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even move much. He calmly wiped the salt with a napkin, smiled at the kind family nearby, and softly whispered thanks. Still, his words from before echoed in the waiter's mind. "Could I speak to the manager, please?" The waiter, however, didn't call the manager. He laughed and shrugged it off like nothing had happened. A few staff members saw his arrogance but didn't step in. They were used to his attitude. He often picked favorites and mocked those who didn't look rich or powerful, but today, he had mocked the wrong man. And the restaurant was not as loud as usual. People whispered. Some pulled out their phones. Some guests were unsure what they had just witnessed, but one thing was clear: something wasn't right. And then someone stood up. A man from the next table walked toward Keanu with a serious look. "Sir, do you want me to call the manager for you?" he asked politely. Keanu gave a slight smile and replied, "That won't be necessary." He looked calm on the outside, but people could feel something deeper behind his quiet eyes. Something sad. Something heavy. Just then, the restaurant doors opened again. The soft sound of heels echoed across the floor. A woman dressed in gold entered with her assistant and took a seat nearby. She glanced around, confused by the strange energy in the room. Her assistant whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves." Her eyes widened. What? In this restaurant alone? Now people were realizing who the man was. The same man who played heroes in movies, who helped children in hospitals, who gave his movie salary away to crew members. Keanu Reeves, the kindest man in Hollywood, was sitting in their restaurant, and someone had just disrespected him. Badly, phones were now recording quietly. One guest sent a video clip to a friend. Another uploaded it on social media with the words, "Waiter threw salt at Keanu at Nusr." The post began spreading fast. But inside the restaurant, the story was still unfolding live. The waiter still didn't understand what he had done. He kept joking with another server. "He's nobody, just some broke guy." But the staff around him were now uneasy. One busboy whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves, man." The waiter froze for a moment, then forced a laugh. "No way, really." But his voice had lost its confidence. Suddenly, there was a change in the atmosphere. A black SUV pulled up outside. It was large, shiny, and tinted. Everyone turned their heads. It was him, the owner, the legend, the reason this place was famous. Salt Bae himself had arrived. He stepped into the restaurant with his usual smile. He wore his sunglasses indoors, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his fingers already ready to sprinkle his signature move. The crowd clapped lightly. A few people stood. Some tried to get his attention for a photo. But Salt Bae noticed something strange. The crowd wasn't as cheerful as usual. He looked around and saw the phones pointing toward the back of the room. Toward one table in the corner, he followed their gaze and his smile began to fade. There he saw Keanu sitting alone, brushing salt from his clothes. A cold expression on his face. Not angry, but tired, disappointed. Salt Bae didn't need to ask anything. He could feel the tension. He knew something had gone wrong. He began walking slowly toward the table. The staff parted quietly as he passed. Everyone was watching now. Every guest, every server, even the kitchen staff peeked from behind the doors. The waiter who threw the salt started to panic. His hands shook. He turned to run to the kitchen, but a manager blocked his path and said, "Stay right here." The waiter gulped. He knew now he had made a mistake, a big one. Salt Bae reached the table and stood before Keanu. He removed his sunglasses, looked down and said, "Sir, what happened here?" Keanu looked up, still calm, and answered simply, "Just a bit too much salt." The way he said it broke the silence in the room. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't sarcasm. It was grace. The whole restaurant fell quiet. Some people had tears in their eyes, because the man who had every right to explode chose peace instead. And now, Salt Bae understood. He turned to his manager and said firmly, "Get the security footage." Everyone held their breath, wondering what would happen next. But deep down, they already knew. This night would be remembered, forever. Salt Bae stood beside Keanu's table in silence. His face was serious now. His sunglasses were tucked into his shirt, and his eyes were focused. He had seen many things in his restaurant before. Laughs, surprises, even celebrity visits, but never something like this. Never a man like Keanu sitting quietly with salt stains on his coat and not a word of complaint. Keanu looked up with calm eyes and gave a polite nod. He didn't look angry. He didn't demand anything. He just said, "There was a bit too much salt." Salt Bae understood the message hidden behind those soft words. He didn't need to shout. Keanu's calmness said more than anger ever could. The room was frozen. No forks moved. No glasses clinked. The guests watched closely. Some were recording, but no one dared to speak. The waiter who had thrown the salt was now sweating, standing near the kitchen doors. Salt Bae slowly turned around and looked toward the manager. "Show me the footage," he said firmly. The manager rushed to the back while Salt Bae turned again toward Keanu. "Let me make this right," he said. Keanu just gave a small smile and said, "I'm okay, thank you." But it was clear he had been disrespected, and people were expecting justice. And the kitchen doors opened and the manager returned with a small tablet in his hands. He whispered something to Salt Bae, who nodded and took the device. The guests near him leaned forward without meaning to. They were curious, anxious, waiting for the truth to be confirmed. Salt Bae watched the video silently. His eyebrows tightened. As he saw the clip, the waiter was seen mocking Keanu, laughing with another staff member. And then came the moment. The salt was not sprinkled, it was thrown. It hit the table, the food, and even Keanu's chest. The proof was clear. There was no excuse. He returned the device to the manager and walked toward the center of the room. He looked around at everyone and spoke loud enough for the room to hear. "I apologize to all of you," he said, "but especially to this gentleman here." He turned back toward Keanu. "Sir, this is not how we treat anyone, especially not someone like you." Keanu stood up, shook Salt Bae's hand, and said gently, "I know it wasn't the restaurant's fault." His tone was kind, not bitter. His eyes showed no hate. Salt Bae bowed his head slightly and said, "Your meal is on the house. Please allow us to serve you properly." He waved his hand, and a special team of chefs appeared. They took away the ruined dish and began preparing a new one, crafted by Salt Bae himself. It wasn't just about the food now. It was about honor, respect, and doing the right thing. The entire restaurant started, clapping softly at first, then louder, not because of the food, not because of the fame, but because they had just witnessed something rare, humility meeting kindness. Salt Bae looked around and nodded. "Service is not just about salt and steak," he said. "It's about heart." The waiter who caused the mess tried to slip away quietly, but the manager stopped him. "You're going to apologize," he said, "or you're not coming back." The waiter, now pale and nervous, walked slowly to Keanu's new table. His voice trembled as he said, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't know who you were." Keanu didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "It's not about who I am." The room fell quiet again, waiting for what he'd say next. "It's about who you choose to be," Keanu finished. The words hit deep. People stared. Some even wiped their eyes. Salt Bae looked at his staff, then turned back to the room. "From today," he said, "no one will be treated differently based on clothes or face or fame." He meant it, and everyone felt it. This wasn't just a lesson for the waiter. It was a message for all. Guests stood up and gave Keanu a respectful nod. Not like fans, but like people honoring a man who showed strength without force. Keanu's new dish arrived, decorated beautifully with gold flakes and fresh herbs. Salt Bae came to the table and performed his famous salt move. But this time, with care and meaning, he gently sprinkled the salt, made eye contact, and bowed before stepping back. Keanu smiled, this time a real one, and said, "That was perfect." The tension in the room slowly faded. Guests began eating again, talking again, but the story of what they had witnessed would stay with them forever. Some would tell their friends, some would post videos, but all of them would remember the day Keanu taught them how to respond to hate with peace, and how Salt Bae, the man of style, showed he still had heart. Salt Bae stood silently beside Keanu Reeves. His hands were together, his face calm but serious. The entire restaurant had just watched the video, and the truth was clear now. The waiter had not made a mistake. He had thrown the salt on purpose, out of disrespect, not show, not style. It was cruel and mean, and it had hurt someone who had done nothing wrong. Keanu did not raise his voice or point fingers. He simply nodded and said, "It's okay." But it wasn't okay, and everyone knew that. Salt Bae gently said, "No, sir, it's not okay, and I'll fix this." Then with a short glance, he signaled his team. The waiter was quietly asked to step outside. He didn't protest, he just lowered his head and left the restaurant. People didn't clap or cheer. They just watched in silence, understanding the weight of what had happened. Salt Bae turned to Keanu again. "Please allow me to give you another table, and a meal the way it should be served." Keanu nodded slowly, and they moved to a different seat, one near the window with a better view. This time the staff handled everything carefully. They cleaned the table, placed a new cloth, polished every glass again, and did it all without rushing. A new waiter, a kind young man, came forward and bowed gently before speaking. "I'm honored to serve you, sir," he said. Keanu smiled and replied, "Thank you, I'm just here to enjoy a simple meal." The waiter nodded and brought him a glass of fresh water with a slice of lemon. Everything felt peaceful again, but it was a different kind of peace, the one that comes after a storm. In the kitchen, Salt Bae rolled up his sleeves. "I'll cook it myself," he said. His team stepped back, watching their master at work. He selected the best cut of steak, seasoned it with care, and grilled it perfectly. The smell filled the kitchen and even reached the guests nearby. But Salt Bae wasn't doing a show now. He was cooking with his heart, not for attention, but to make things right. Meanwhile, people in the restaurant were still whispering, "Did you see how calm he was? He didn't even get angry. That's Keanu Reeves, right? He's even better in real life." Some guests who had once ignored him now watched with admiration, not because he was famous, but because he had acted with grace and dignity. A little girl walked up to his table, holding a napkin. She looked nervous, but her mother smiled and nodded at her. The girl handed the napkin to Keanu and said, "You're my hero, even when you don't talk." Keanu took the napkin, unfolded it, and smiled. Inside, the girl had drawn a small picture of him with a heart. He gently said, "This means more to me than you know." Salt Bae came out of the kitchen carrying the dish himself. This time, there was no music, no flashing lights, no performance. He walked slowly, placed the dish on the table, and bowed low. "From my heart to yours," he said. Keanu looked at the plate. It was beautiful, the steak perfectly placed, golden flakes shining softly under the lights. Salt Bae performed his famous salt move one last time. But slower than usual, the salt fell like snow, not in a flashy way, but gentle and respectful. Keanu smiled and said, "Now that's the right amount." The room chuckled softly, but no one laughed loud. They all felt the moment was special. The meal began and Keanu took a bite. His face lit up. "This is amazing," he said. Salt Bae sat at the edge of the table and said, "I want you to know this restaurant stands for respect and service. We failed earlier, but we won't forget." Keanu nodded and said, "Everyone makes mistakes, it's what we do after that matters." That line hit deep. A few people clapped quietly. One couple stood and applauded. The rest joined in slowly, not because of the steak, but because of the man who had forgiven instead of shouting. Keanu raised his hand slightly to stop the claps and said, "I just came here for dinner and I leave with hope." The staff around him smiled. The chefs peeked from the kitchen. The mood in the restaurant had completely changed. What started as an ugly moment had become something beautiful. People returned to their meals with a warm feeling in their hearts. Some even apologized to their waiters just for being rude earlier in the night. Outside, the waiter who had thrown the salt sat on the curb, his head in his hands. He wasn't angry anymore. He was ashamed. A manager stepped outside and handed him his jacket. "Go home," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." The waiter nodded, tears in his eyes. He had learned a hard lesson, but he would remember it forever. Inside the restaurant, Keanu finished his meal. He stood up, shook Salt Bae's hand, and thanked the staff one by one, and then quietly, without bodyguards or noise, he walked out into the night. The restaurant would never forget this evening. The guests wouldn't forget it either. It wasn't just about food anymore, it was about how kindness wins, even when it's covered in salt. Keanu Reeves stood up from his chair after finishing his meal. He had eaten quietly, with slow movements and soft thank yous to every staff member who approached him. He wasn't just being polite. He was showing something more, something deeper. Even after being disrespected earlier, he chose peace over anger, kindness over revenge. Salt Bae walked beside him as he moved toward the exit. "Please, let me escort you out," he said respectfully. Keanu smiled and nodded. "You don't need to do that, but thank you." As they walked past tables, many guests stood and gave him small nods or claps. One man even said, "Thank you for showing us what dignity looks like outside." The cool air of the evening touched Keanu's face. He paused at the door, took a deep breath, and looked up at the sky. Salt Bae stood beside him quietly. "Tonight should have gone differently," he said with regret in his voice. Keanu looked at him and replied, "You can't control everything, but you fixed what mattered." Salt Bae offered to call a car for Keanu, but he gently refused. "I'll walk a little," he said. "Helps clear my mind." Salt Bae gave him a deep bow. It was an honor. Keanu nodded once, then walked away calmly, hands in his coat pockets, disappearing into the quiet streets like a shadow. Back inside the restaurant, the staff slowly returned to work. But something had changed. Their mood was different. Their steps were more careful, their tone more respectful. The new waiter who had served Keanu was still standing near the window watching him leave. He had tears in his eyes, not of sadness but of respect. The manager approached him and asked, "You all right?" The waiter nodded and said, "I've never seen someone like that before. Not just famous, but truly humble." The manager smiled. "Neither have I," he said. "He taught us all something." Meanwhile, the other waiter, the one who threw the salt, was still sitting outside. He hadn't gone home, his jacket was on his lap, his face was pale, and his hands were shaking. He was thinking about everything he had done, not just tonight, but all the times he had laughed at customers, looked down on quiet people, and only smiled for the rich ones. A young busboy came out and sat next to him. They didn't speak for a while. Then the busboy quietly said, "He didn't get you fired, you know." The waiter looked up slowly. "He could have ruined me." The busboy nodded, but he didn't. Inside, the family who had helped Keanu earlier, the mother, father, and little girl, were finishing their meal. The mother whispered to her husband, "I've never seen someone handle humiliation with such grace." The father replied, "And I've never seen someone as rich as him act so normal." The little girl held up her phone. She had taken a picture of her drawing, the one she gave to Keanu, and posted it with a simple caption, "This man is kind." Within minutes, the post was spreading online. It wasn't a big dramatic video, just a soft photo, but people felt the honesty in it. Elsewhere in the city, people were already sharing the video clips from earlier. The one where Keanu calmly said, "Just a bit too much salt," had gone viral. Thousands of comments praised him. Some said, "This is why he's loved." Others said, "No acting here, this is who he truly is." Even celebrities started reposting the video. Actors, musicians, athletes, everyone had something kind to say. One actor wrote, "Keanu is a master of silent strength." Another said, "We need more people like him in the world." But Keanu didn't post anything. He didn't comment or like a post. He never even mentioned it again in interviews. For him, it wasn't a big moment, it was just another day. Another choice to stay kind, even when treated badly. Back at the restaurant, Salt Bae sat down with his manager and said, "We're changing how we train our staff." The manager nodded. Yes, starting tomorrow, Salt Bae added. And make sure every new employee watches what happened tonight. The manager smiled and said, You want to show them the mistake? Salt Bae shook his head. No. I want to show them the way that man responded to it. The night slowly ended. The lights dimmed, the tables were cleaned, the doors locked. But the memory of what happened stayed alive, not just in the walls of Nusr, but in every phone screen, every mind that saw how one man's calm could turn an ugly moment into a lesson for all. And as the video kept spreading, one thing became clear. True power is not how loud you are, but how gentle you stay when you could be loud. And Keanu Reeves showed the world that night. Without shouting, without cursing, without walking away in pride, he stayed, forgave, and walked out as a true legend. The next morning, the internet was buzzing with one name, Keanu Reeves. People across the world were sharing the video clip from the restaurant. In the short video, Keanu sat quietly as salt was thrown on his food and clothes. Yet he didn't yell, didn't insult, didn't even stand up. He just asked softly, Could I speak to the manager, please? People were shocked, not because a celebrity was mistreated, but because of how calm and kind he remained. Viewers from every country began commenting. Some said, He's not just acting like a good man, he is one. Others said, I would have exploded, but he stayed peaceful. The video quickly went viral on all platforms: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. News reporters picked it up. Headlines read, Keanu disrespected, responds with, Grace, another one said. Salt thrown, dignity shown. Even people who had never been to Nusr restaurant were now watching and learning from the moment. One part of the video touched everyone deeply. It was when Keanu looked at the waiter and said, It's not about who I am, it's about who you choose to be. That line hit millions of hearts like thunder. People began using it in captions, tweets, and even motivational posters. Schools, businesses, and life coaches began referencing that moment as an example of patience and self-control. Back at the restaurant, Salt Bae was in a meeting with his entire staff. Everyone was gathered in the main dining area, wearing their uniforms. He stood at the center with his arms crossed. His face was serious but not angry. Last night, he began, we were visited by a great man. Not just because he's famous, but because he showed us how to treat others, even when we fail, to treat him right. The staff remained quiet. Some looked ashamed, some nodded slowly. The manager added, From today, our training will be different. We won't just teach how to serve food, we'll teach how to serve with respect. Salt Bae looked around at every face and said, This restaurant doesn't survive because of salt. It survives because of service. Outside the restaurant, news reporters and fans had gathered. Everyone wanted to take pictures, ask questions, get interviews. But Salt Bae came out and said politely, Keanu does not want attention. He didn't ask for fame. Please remember, he stayed silent even when he had every right to be loud. The reporters respected that. Some even stepped back, understanding. The mood, meanwhile, Keanu Reeves was somewhere far from cameras, far from the crowd. He had gone back to his simple routine, helping on film sets, visiting children's hospitals, and riding his motorcycle through quiet streets. When asked by a close friend why he didn't speak about the viral video, Keanu replied, Because I didn't do anything special. I just didn't want to make it worse. His silence made people respect him more. Many celebrities, even those known for being loud or flashy, shared his video and called him their role model. One famous singer wrote, This is how you win the world, with kindness, not noise. Another actor tweeted, Keanu didn't need to teach a lesson, he just lived it. At the restaurant, the waiter who threw the salt returned. His eyes were heavy, his steps slow. He wasn't forced to come back, he came on his own. The manager sat him down. Why did you come? He asked. The waiter replied, Because I need to apologize. The manager nodded and said, Not to us, to him, but he's already forgiven you. The waiter looked down and said, I didn't know who he was. The manager leaned forward and said, That's the problem. Would you treat someone different just because they're not famous? The waiter closed his eyes, realizing the truth. "No, I shouldn't," he whispered. "But I did." He walked into the kitchen and apologized to every member of the staff. "I embarrassed all of us," he said. "I'll work to earn back your respect." Some accepted his words, others stayed quiet, but at least they saw that he was trying to change. Keanu's quiet strength had touched even the one who made the mistake. Meanwhile, a group of students made a school project about the event. They called it The Power of Calm. They printed posters, wrote poems, and even performed a short play in front of their class. One boy played Keanu, sitting quietly as another pretended to pour salt on him. The audience clapped loudly at the end, cheering the message behind it. One teacher wrote on the board, "It's not about who I am, it's about who you choose to be." And every student wrote that line in their notebook. Keanu didn't even know. But his words had become a lesson for children around the world. That's what made the story so powerful. It wasn't just about a steak or a restaurant or a mistake. It was about how one man's kindness could ripple through the world like waves in the ocean, quietly, gently, but strong enough to move hearts. The waiter who had thrown salt on Keanu sat quietly in the employee room of the restaurant. His face was pale, and his eyes showed regret. He had not been fired, but he had been given a second chance. The day before, he had mocked a customer, disrespected a man, and embarrassed his workplace. But today something had changed inside him. He had seen with his own eyes how Keanu acted. No shouting, no blaming, no revenge, only calm words and kindness. The waiter whispered to himself, "Why didn't he insult me back?" The answer hurt, because Keanu wasn't weak. He was strong enough to forgive. That kind of strength the waiter had never known before. At that same moment, Salt Bae entered the staff room. He looked at the waiter and said, "You didn't lose your job yesterday, but you lost something bigger, respect." The waiter nodded. "I know I want to earn it back," Salt Bae said. "Then start by learning what true service means." He handed the waiter a printed photo. It was the picture of Keanu smiling. At the little girl who had given him a drawing, underneath was the line, "It's not about who I am, it's about who you choose to be." Salt Bae said, "Hang this in your locker, read it every day." The waiter took it with both hands and whispered, "I will." That day, a change began, not just in one man but in the whole team. The staff at Nusr started treating every guest with extra care. Every plate was served with respect. Every customer was greeted with a smile, whether rich or poor, famous or unknown. They were all treated as important. News outlets kept sharing the video. It reached places even Keanu didn't know. In a small village in South Africa, a teacher showed the clip to her class. "Look at this man," she said. "He didn't fight back with anger, but with peace." The students watched in silence. Some even clapped at the end. In Brazil, a restaurant owner printed the quote and hung it on the front door. "This is how we want to serve our guests," he said. In Japan, a cafe gave out free coffee for a day in honor of Keanu kindness. It was becoming more than a moment. It was becoming a movement. Back in Los Angeles, Keanu was asked by a fan outside a bookshop, "Did that really happen?" Keanu just smiled and said, "People mess up sometimes, it's how we react that matters." He didn't try to be a hero, didn't give a big speech, but his words carried more weight than any headline. At Nusr, the little girl and her parents returned a week later. They wanted to thank the staff for handling the situation so well. The manager welcomed them warmly and said, "You were part of the change. Your daughter's drawing touched him." The girl smiled shyly and asked, "Will he come back?" The manager smiled. "Maybe someday." Later that night, the waiter who had thrown the salt did something surprising. He took out his phone, recorded a short video, and posted it online. "I'm the one who disrespected Keanu Reeves," he said. "And I'm sorry. I judged someone by how they looked. And I was wrong," he continued. "He could have humiliated me, but he didn't. Instead, he showed me respect, even when I didn't deserve it. That changed me. I'm learning from it." He didn't try to protect his image. He didn't make excuses. The video was real, raw, and honest. That video also went viral. People were surprised, but many praised him for owning his mistake. Comments poured in. Some said, You messed up. But you learned and that counts, others said. Keanu forgave you, so we will too. And then something unbelievable happened. One of Keanu's friends saw the video and showed it to him. After watching it, Keanu nodded and said softly, "Good for him." He didn't comment online, didn't call the waiter, but in his heart, he had already let go of the hurt. That's the kind of person he was. Not just an actor, but a man who healed without hurting back. The world watched, and learned not from shouting or punishment, but from silence and forgiveness. And the waiter? He became one of the most respectful and hardworking staff members at the restaurant. Other staff began calling him the new guy, not because he was new, but because he had changed so much. One day, when a poor old man came in, he was the first to pull out a chair, pour water, and smile warmly. He didn't know it, but someone recorded that moment too. The caption read, "The waiter who mocked learned how to care." And that video, too, went viral, because in a world full of noise, sometimes the softest hearts make the loudest difference. Weeks passed after the night Keanu Reeves was disrespected at the Nusr restaurant, but people still talked about it. Not because of the salt, not because of the waiter's mistake, but because of how Keanu had responded. He didn't shout, didn't fight, didn't curse. He stayed calm, stayed kind, and showed the world what true strength looks like. In that short moment, he taught a lesson that no school or book could explain better. One man's quiet actions had started a wave of change, not only inside the restaurant, but across the world. In schools, restaurants, offices, and even online, people shared his words again and again. It's not about who I am, it's about who you choose to be. At the Nusr restaurant, something new appeared near the front door. It was a small plaque, made of smooth gold, placed carefully on the wall beside the entrance. It didn't mention Keanu's name, but it was clear who it was for. The words on it read, "To those who show kindness even when it's not returned." People began taking pictures with the plaque. Some smiled with tears in their eyes. Some simply stood quietly and stared. It had become more than a decoration. It was a reminder, a symbol of dignity. Even the staff started pointing at it during training. One manager said, "This is our rule now, not just how to serve food, but how to serve with heart." Salt Bae, who once focused more on image and performance, had also changed. He became more humble, more thoughtful. He spoke to every new hire personally. "We don't only serve steak here, we serve respect," he said with meaning. He even printed out Keanu's quote and gave it to each staff member on their first day. And the waiter, the one who once mocked and laughed, was now the kindest among them. He greeted every guest with real care. He helped the junior staff. He never forgot how he felt that night outside the restaurant, waiting for punishment that never came. He didn't just learn customer service. He learned what it meant to be a better person. His journey was also shared online. People called it the redemption story. His video apology had millions of views, and many thanked him for admitting his mistake. In one interview, he said, "The man I disrespected didn't teach me by shouting, he taught me by not fighting back. That changed my life." Keanu Reeves, as always, stayed quiet. He didn't talk about the story on social media, didn't post anything, didn't make a big speech, but his silence made the message stronger. He didn't need applause. His actions had already echoed through hearts around the world. In a small town far away, a boy was bullied at school. One day when his classmate pushed him, the boy didn't fight back. Instead, he picked up his books, smiled, and said, "I hope you have a better day." Later, when asked why he didn't fight, he replied, "Because Keanu didn't." That moment was shared by a teacher who had shown the viral video. To her class, the story kept growing, changing people in ways no one had planned. And it all started with a simple act of patience. A few months later, Salt Bae received a letter. It had no return address, no name, just a simple note inside, written in clear handwriting. It said, "Thank you for letting the world see that kindness is still alive. Even when things go wrong, we can still choose what's right." He placed the letter inside a glass frame and hung it near the kitchen where only staff could see it. Every time someone had a bad day or made a mistake, he would point to the letter and say, "This is what matters." And so, what began as A moment of disrespect became a movement of change. Not through revenge, but through grace. Not through shouting, but through silence. Keanu Reeves reminded the world that being strong doesn't mean raising your voice. It means staying kind when you have every reason not to be. Now, when people walk into that restaurant, they don't just see food and lights. They see a story in the walls. They see the golden plaque at the door, the framed quote in the kitchen, and the waiter who now smiles with true warmth in his heart. Some even say the place feels different now, more real, more human, because in the end the salt didn't matter. The mistake didn't matter. What mattered was how a man chose to rise above it, with kindness, with class, with no need for fame or credit, just peace. And that quietly became one of the most powerful stories of kindness the world had ever seen.